Welcome, everybody, to the Band of Brothers live discussion with my good friend, Tony Roberts from Analog Toys. How are you, sir?
Welcome, everybody, to...
I am doing great as soon as I mute YouTube. Sorry, that was me.
No, that's fine. At first, I thought it was my computer, and I'm like, what setting could that be? No, that's
no,
great.
I've got StreamYard on a monitor here, and I've got YouTube here, so I can see the live chat.
Right.
And I have to quickly mute it just as it started.
No, that's fine. As a matter of fact, right as we get started. So Sal has already sent a super chat saying, getting ready and heading into work when this starts. So I'll pop in when I can or catch the replay. Easily my favorite World War II piece of entertainment, start to finish. I love this show. And I also wanted to hit one more here. Jesse Hughes says, I know the soundtrack will be mentioned at some point this evening, but I just want to give it a special shout out and no sound when it isn't needed. Very, very true. Very, very true. Yeah. I struggled, Tony, to think about how I wanted to start this discussion. And there's a lot of people online right now. I don't know if you've noticed this, but there are a lot of people who are doing first-time reactions to this show, episode by episode on YouTube.
I hadn't noticed, no.
Oh, dude, I was looking just to grab clips because it's easier. For those of you who aren't in video production, it's easier to grab clips that are already posted on YouTube of a show or series than it is to try and rip a Blu-ray and then transcode everything. So, Dusty Toys, this just started. So we just started, Dusty. It's all good. So, I was looking at all these people, like it was countless numbers of videos of different YouTube channels that were watching this for the first time. And they're going like episode by episode. And I thought, so there's a lot of discussion about this show right now for whatever reason. I assume people who've never seen it before. It's almost 20 years old or is 20 years old. So, you guys are a little late to the party. But what I wanted to ask you about, Tony, as both a film person and a history person like myself, what is, in your mind, the right balancing act between what Hollywood's going to do, which is they can't leave well enough alone. Like Hollywood's going to mess with something to some degree. They can't help themselves. They're just going to do it. And accuracy. In other words, my opinion is this. If you're doing history and it's interesting enough to tell the story at all and put money into it, there's no need to change it, especially when you've got the guys still alive to consult with and a book and everything else. But we know that's not ever going to happen. So what's your take on that?
To me, the perfect balance, if you were to give someone an example, is this TV show. This is the perfect balance between juggling a wide cast of characters, a number of true events. This, to me, this Band of Brothers, the TV show, gets this 100% correct.
Okay. I think as well that it's the best World War II anything that's ever been made to date.
Yeah.
That being said, before I came in on this live stream, the last 2 days, I winced a little bit and said, okay, I'm going to do this. I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it just to see. Because for those of you who haven't heard my opinion yet on this, and if you have, if you've been with the channel long enough, you've heard it. I think Saving Private Ryan sucks. I think it's a horrible film, and I hate that movie. And I always said that Band of Brothers inadvertently was like Steven Spielberg's apology tour for private. He didn't say that. I'm saying that. But when I looked at it, I said, okay, it's got the real guys using the real names. It's based off the book from Stephen Ambrose, who interviewed all these guys and has all these other bestsellers about history to his credit. But then I thought, it's Hollywood. I already know of one big error in the thing. I promise you guys we're not going to talk about the errors, but I want to set this up now. I already knew that there was that one big error where they wrote in that Blythe died when in fact he lived. Like he got wounded and he got taken back, but he didn't die. And so somebody indulged themselves. So I thought, the responsible thing to do here before this live stream is to just go in and look and just see. Because I'd read a quote from or Major Winners. I read a quote from Major Winners where he said, during the development of the show, I went and asked Tom Hanks, because Tom Hanks was one of the producers on the show.
Yeah.
He said, it looks like you guys, are only getting this about 80% right or whatever from what I've seen. He goes, and there's like things that I don't understand why you did what you did. And Tom Hanks, according to Winters, and I certainly don't distrust what that man ever says.
Yeah.
May he rest in peace. He said, oh, Major, he said, I'm just going to tell you it's Hollywood. He goes, most of the time people are lucky to get 12% of a historical thing right in this town. He goes, if we get 17%, it's a victory. And I'm going, I read that quote and I'm thinking, but why? So Melinda looks over at me and she says, because they can't help themselves, because it's hubris. And I'm like, but they have a book and they've got the guys, they're interviewing them at the beginning of every episode. Why? So that's where I'm not struggling with Band of Brothers. What I'm trying to impress to everybody, and then I promise I'll shut up, is that Band of Brothers has inaccuracies just like any other Hollywood production. But by some miracle, by some massive miracle, they did not completely indulge themselves in everything that they probably wanted to do. And they actually strayed from the path quite a few times. But somehow, some way in the salt shaker, Band of Brothers came out 75-80% intact, which is massive. Like, it's massive. So Tony, when did you first see this show? Tell me your first experience watching this. When was it?
So Band of Brothers first aired in September 2001. So it's 20 years old this year. But I don't believe it aired in the UK in September. I think we got it a little bit later. The reason I know that is I had returned to the UK in 2001, having moved to Australia as a young kid. I was returning to my country of birth, and I remember seeing September 11, the attacks on the World Trade Center. I watched that live on the news at my auntie's house, who I was staying with when I first arrived. But when Band of Brothers was aired on TV, I was living in my own place. So it must have been probably November. And my first experience of Band of Brothers was, I knew the show was coming. It was going to be aired on, I don't remember what channel it was on, but it was aired on British television late, I think, on a Thursday night. And I literally watched one episode per week as it was live. And then as soon as it came out on DVD, I bought the metal tin box set, which I still own. And I've probably watched that, I'm not exaggerating, 40 times from start to finish. And then sometime last year, I did a retro talk on your Patreon, and we started talking about movies, and you really re-inspired my passion for physical media. So I now have Blu-ray version.
Nice.
This I've never taken out of the case.
Right, yeah.
This I've probably watched on Blu-ray. I think I've watched the whole series 3 times since I bought this. The best $14 I ever spent.
Oh,
$14 for both.
Yeah, without a doubt, the best money ever spent. I mean, every time. Yeah. If I find out that they're actually, there's no rumor for this right now. There's no scuttle out there. So I'm just wish fulfillment right now. If they announce tomorrow that they were going to release a 4K of this off the original negatives, I'd be first in line. Like I really would. Scott Knudsen, thank you.
Me too. And
yes.
If I was broke and I had no money to buy the 4K, I'd pimp myself out. That's how important this show is to me. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Scott Knudsen, thank you for the super chat. He says, turns out they're not selling war bonds anymore, so I figure I'll send the cash your way. Looking forward to this all week. Hey, no problem, Scott. Thank you for being here, man.
Thanks, Scott.
Let's see. And Sigma Experiment says, Band of Brothers is the best example of what Michael is talking about. Pearl Harbor is the opposite extreme. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Wicked Person says, I don't care about fictional war movies like Private Ryan, often too popcorn. The fact that these Band of Brothers guys were real made all the difference to me. Yes. Yeah, it keeps them on a path of, when I say on a path, I mean Hollywood. It keeps Hollywood on a path of, and again, I know that Hollywood has taken real stories before and totally just run away with them. Most of the time that they do that when those people are already long dead, like, you know, they've been dead for like 100 years. I think the gravity of the actual veterans of Easy Company being asked to consult on this kept them within the guardrails a little bit. Yeah. My Brian Dillingham, thank you for the Dillinghamism, sir. Appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Brian doesn't even need to type his super chat anymore because we know what he means.
Right. Yeah, Zantara, you're right. She says Pearl Harbor. Oof, that was a turkey. Absolutely. My experience watching this the first time was frustrating because when it came out on HBO, I was a very, very poor out of college kid in LA trying to make it in the film industry on $400 a week, and I did not have cable. So I knew this thing was on. The hype was everywhere. The big posters were all over the big buildings in LA. I couldn't see it. Like I had no way of watching it. So as soon as it came out on DVD, I was right there like you were. I just bought it and then I just binged it. You know, I just boom. And I've had it, you know, ever since. Now, and I'm going to say that Red Tail's Anselin is well-intentioned, but very inaccurate. I think they wanted to do something great, but it's real. It delves into the whole almost like World War II, 1940s era war film type delivery of things. So I'm not going to talk about Private Ryan anymore, guys. Just know that I don't like it, and just know that every time I say something great about Band of Brothers, I'm throwing a dart at Private Ryan at the same time.
Yes.
Okay. Paratroopers in boot camp. This whole new idea, because I know that they experimented with the idea between the two world wars. They were experimenting with lots of things like aerial bombardment, all that kind of stuff. But this was really the war where the paratrooper was heavily involved for the very first time on all fronts. So walk me through a little bit, Tony, about your feelings about both paratroopers and paratrooper technology and your perspective on what these guys had to go through in the late 30s, early 40s.
Well, I mean, the huge difference between what they went through and what I went through, because I am parachute qualified as a ex-member of the British Special Air Service Regiment. The huge difference, and they talk about it in the interviews, is that a lot of those guys had never even been in a plane before. They said, you know, they went up in planes many, many times. It was years later before they ever landed in a plane.
Right.
So I'm trying to imagine what went through their head when you are the guy, when you've stood up in the back of that Hercules, you've hooked up your static line, and you are 2 or 3 down in what they call the stick. You know, the stick is the group of guys who are going to jump out of the side door. The worst job is being the first guy, because you've got to stand in that doorway for 2 minutes. Right. And I remember the first parachute jump not the first parachute jump I ever did, but the first one I ever did where I was number 1 in the stick. We were parachuting somewhere near Oxford in the United Kingdom, and we were so low to the ground that I could actually see the cars on the motorway next to the drop zone. And I could tell you from that distance whether the driver was male or female. That's how close we were. It was like 400 feet with very, very low jump. It's a nerve-wracking experience. You know, you're there by the door. So I'm trying to imagine these guys. I don't know when the first time you ever went on an aeroplane was. For me, I was about 7, I think. My family went to Spain on a holiday. The whole experience of an aircraft taking off, sitting in, is quite the experience. And then all of a sudden, you take off, you get up, and now you've got to jump out of this thing. I just don't know how these guys just wrap their head around all of that.
Sure. Well, a lot of them, they said, did it for a pay increase. They said,
Yes,
oh, you're going to get what, 50 extra bucks a month in your paycheck if you volunteer for para. And they were like, all right. And a lot of them, from what I recall, said after the war, you know, don't ever jump out of a perfectly good airplane. It's crazy.
No,
Like, don't do it.
No. It's really interesting. In the so I was in the Special Forces Reserve, not the regular. So 22 SAS is the regular regiment that is very famous for Bravo 20 and the Iranian embassy, all that kind of stuff. The selection process for the reserves is slightly different. And what ends up happening, once you've finished both aptitude and continuation training, which are the two different phases of what we overall call selection, when you get badged and you become a Special Forces operator in 21 SAS, you're on 12 months probation. The reason being, we don't do our parachute training until we're badged, whereas with the regulars, they do that as part of selection.
Right.
So the reason you're on probation is because if they send you to RAF Bryce Norton to do your parachute course and you refuse to jump out of that plane, you ain't staying in the SAS. You're going back. So because guys do that. I mean, I've never actually seen it, but I've heard the stories that, you know, they can be the toughest, fittest, best soldiers in the world, but you stand them in the door of a Hercules and tell them to jump out, they piss their pants and walk away.
Right.
So it's a major reason why the paratroopers are soldiers that you just don't mess with.
Right.
Because the courage it takes to stand in that doorway and jump out with equipment strapped to your legs and a leg bag that everybody lost, and it's nuts, man. It's nuts. And the fortitude that these men must have had to not only do that, but to jump into Nazi occupied France.
Right.
Dude, you must have balls the size of cannonballs.
And they said that a lot of guys washed out during that and went into general infantry. You know, they wouldn't do the jumps, or they froze, or they couldn't make it through the physical training, or, you know, that kind of thing. It was a very elite group at that time, and it still is, of course, but it very much then was bleeding edge tactics and technology all in one. And you're putting your faith in all that. And to know, you know, that famous story, and I have a photo here just to show it, the actual historical photo of Eisenhower saying goodbye to the paratroopers, you know, right before D-Day. And I've been to that airfield in England. It's been a few days there. To know that these guys had gone through years of training to get ready for this day, to get ready for this operation. And at the last minute, in typical, I want to say, bureaucratic fashion, they give most of these guys a leg bag that they've never trained with. It's going to throw off their jump. They have no idea. They're like, why can't I just get, you know, my rig like before? And they're like, nah, we're giving you this leg bag. And the leg bags all rip off as they jump out because of the force of the prop blast. So now they have no equipment landing in Nazi occupied France. I mean, and they're still just going to do it anyway. And that's kind of where I wanted to start with our discussion of the show. I want to talk about their training a little bit, but I did want to point this out since you brought us so nicely into this whole thing about jumping out over France in the middle of flak and explosions in the middle of the night. You know, there's that moment where Winters, after he lands, he hooks up with this guy from Able Company. So he's found another guy who's been thrown completely off his drop zone. And then they finally hook up with a few other dudes who are from Easy Company and a few guys from the 82nd Airborne, or 82nd. And he's like, hey, does anybody have a raincoat? And they're like, yeah, one guy managed to get to the ground with his gear. So we're going to just throw this poncho over him. And he literally pulls the escape compass out of his zipper on his fly, puts it on a map in the middle of the night with just a flashlight, looks at it for like 3 seconds, and then he turns the flashlight off and he's like, okay, I know exactly where we are. We're 3 kilometers from this, and that's where, you know, and you're going, this is why this guy was so good. I mean, this is why this man is a legend to this day, because Winters just plugged in. Like the man just knew how to do this stuff. I don't know if it was supreme focus, innate talent, both. I mean, what does that take, Tony? Like, is it like a thing where some guys are just good at learning French and some guys aren't? Like, or is it discipline?
I'll always lean back on my own experiences of Special Forces selection, of what a legend, both the actor and the real man.
Right.
Absolute legend. The reason that the first month of Special Forces selection in the United Kingdom is based around individual marches across the Brecon Beacon Mountains, because it's individual, so they know they're testing you and nobody else.
Right.
It is about your own personal motivation. You can quit at any time you want. No one encourages you. It's not like that terrible TV show, where they put celebrities through select. Right. None of that stuff actually happens, right? You run around the mountains 6 days a week for 4 weeks, with the marches getting increasingly longer and heavier weights, etc. All you've got to be able to do is keep marching and navigate.
Right.
Because a lot of guys, when they're exhausted, and you're not allowed to write anything on your map, you'll go into the first checkpoint and the DS will say to you, DS is directing staff. You get to the checkpoint and they'll say, show me on the map where you are. Now, you don't point with your finger because it's too big on a 1 to 50,000 scale map. So you get a blade of grass so you can specifically point where you are.
Yeah.
You go, this is where I am at the checkpoint. Where did you come from? And you have to show them where you came from. And then they read out your next grid reference once. You read it out, they read it out, you look and you go, okay, where are you going to? I'm going there. Nothing gets written down in case you get captured, etc.
Right.
So it's this whole, you might have just marched 7 kilometers over mountainous terrain with a heavy backpack on. You're exhausted. And they want to see if you can take in the information, retain the information, and then not get lost on the next leg. Right. And major winners would have been the chief instructor on Special Forces selection if it was modern day. Right. Because he was just a guy who could ignore all of the weather, the physical exhaustion, the hunger, the dehydration, and still go, just read me that grid reference once and I know where I'm going. Right. So some guys have it. I mean, perhaps it was from his, he came from a hardworking background. He was a Mennonite, I believe.
Right.
I imagine that he was used to physical work and, going out and doing a good day's work every single day, and could ignore all of that other stuff and focus on the task at hand. I know from my own experience, it's not something that everybody just has. It is a combination of, I think, talent, intellect, and character. And that man had all three in spades.
Yeah, it's unreal to see. I mean, I have to imagine that Damian Lewis had one of the hardest jobs of anybody on the show, making sure that his characterization of this living guy was correct. I mean, the other guys, sure, I mean, they did a great job. They all did a fabulous job, but I would say that Damian Lewis was the number one as far as like having to really dig in. And then afterwards, I would actually say David Schwimmer had the other hardest job to capture Sobel the way he did. And I'm so glad that you brought up that whole thing about how you trained with, orienting or orientating a map. I've heard that word said both ways, orienting and orientating. Either way, because we got to talk about their training first. There's been a lot of historical debate in the wake of Band of Brothers about, was Sobel that inept of a guy? Was he that mean? Was he that horrible? And I've watched footage from one of the last big Easy Company reunions where Sobel, it was after Band of Brothers came out, where Sobel's son showed up and gave a speech. Like he addressed the crowd, and Garnier and all those guys were still alive, and they were just like, that's the bravest guy in the room right there, is the guy. And they weren't being funny. They were like genuinely respecting this guy's kid, because he was like, look, he's like, I know that this show has enhanced my dad's rep, and I know you guys had a hard time with him, you know, when you were in the war. He's like, but I just wanted to let you guys all know that he was like a great father, and he, you know, didn't abandon us, and he was like this really good man, and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And there was all these tears shed between all the guys that came up and hugged him and stuff for, you know, being there and showing up.
Yeah.
But that being said, there are guys who are ready to lead in the field in combat, and there are guys who clearly don't have it. You know, they're good at getting people muddy and dirty and trained for that situation by being a screw turner, but they're not able or capable of practicing in the field. Yeah. I guess I feel like that's the middle ground with the real Sobel. So it's somewhere in the middle where he was probably really good at training people, and he trained the best company in the you know, airborne, but he didn't have it when it came to boots on the ground instincts. Yeah. I guess is what I'm saying. We have some super chats here real quick. Blake Romo, thank you. He says, started the VHS set from the thrift store last year. Few episodes left. Life got in the way, but easily the best World War II show I've ever seen. Outstanding. I agree, Blake. I really do. Gerard O'Connor, thank you for the super chat. He says, yo, guys. Hey, chat. Dropping the knowledge as always. Thanks, gents. You are welcome. Thank you. Wicked person. Thank you. He says, I teach 10th grade history. Where most teachers showed the kids the first 30 minutes of Private Ryan each year, I show episode 2 of Band of Brothers instead. Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, Band of Brothers is far more, even if, let's just say for a minute that Saving Private Ryan was a completely historically accurate movie. It's not. It's totally fiction. It's totally fiction. But let's just say hypothetically that all that actually happened. It's still not a very gripping or entertaining movie to watch once Omaha Beach is over. It's like Omaha Beach was its set piece, its centerpiece on the table, and then they expect you to go eat the rubber chicken dinner, and it's like I'd rather just look at the centerpiece again. I
mean, for me, I'm Matt Damon is lucky that he became Jason Bourne, because if he didn't become Jason Bourne, I was going to hate him for the rest of my life.
Same. That really redeemed him for me. King Eric the Greatest, thank you for the super chat. He says, Tony and Michael, have you watched the German Band of Brothers? It's called Generation War in English. I've heard of this. Tony, have you seen it?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay. I've heard of it. I've heard of it for several years. The one thing that concerns me is that they say that this miniseries that's told from the perspective of a bunch of young German men and women, that it never addresses the final solution, that it never actually addresses the Holocaust. And it's like, that seems kind of like a dodge. So I've been meaning to watch it, but that one omission does make me kind of raise an eyebrow a little bit. Scott Knudsen, thank you for the super chat. He says, I think the general decline of war movies between A Bridge Too Far and today can be chalked up to so very few veterans being in Hollywood now. Band of Brothers having access to the real people clearly helped bridge the gap. Yes, it did.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So, we have one more. Our friend Laserpants says, okay, I'm sold. Just bought the Blu-ray set on Amazon. I'm looking forward to finally seeing this. Still haven't seen Ghostbusters. You know what? I haven't either. It's okay. Watch Band of Brothers 5 or 6 times. I actually wanted to start the show saying that, Tony. I was like, isn't it nice to be able to talk about something that's awesome and real? And when I say real, I mean based on real events, and something that gives you an appreciation and teaches you something. And it's not just another guy in Star Wars bounty hunter armor running around on a fake digital set. Like, whatever. I know I'm trolling my own audience right now. That's my only talent. Speaking of Sobel, I decided that I'm going to risk demonetization of this show because I've wanted to talk about this with Tony for so long. I'm making it a multimedia extravaganza. So I have put in a bunch of clips. So I wanted to play you a clip from Band of Brothers where Sobel and Easy Company are now in England, and they're trying to still run drills and train and get ready for the invasion. But Sobel is very easily rooked. He's not the quickest whip. So here we go. And where is it? There we go.
Who broke silence? I think it's Major Horton, sir.
Major Horton? What is he? Did he join us?
I think maybe he's moving between the platoons, sir.
What is the goddamn hold up, Mr. Sobel?
That I couldn't play the whole clip because I was trying to mitigate the whole thing. But I mean, from everything that I've read, and I've read the Ambrose book and I've watched a lot of other interviews, a lot of these character traits of these different guys, whether it's Garnier or Leapgot or, Muck and Pincata and, all these dudes, they're all fairly accurate. I mean, like a few liberties have been taken here and there, but by and large, these guys were all characters and they were all, I mean, so my question, Tony, is that the kind of thing that you would also have seen some guys do when they were fed up with an officer that just couldn't hack it?
Absolutely. I've met some real people like Sobel. I've also his name escapes me. The guy who was doing the impressions just there.
Oh yeah. Crap. It's gone out of my
radio guy.
Yeah, the radio guy.
We call him the radio guy.
Right.
I've met guys like that as well. That's one of the things that this is the first episode, right? And I fell in love with this show because people like Sobel, I had met guys like that in the army. Lutz, Joe Lutz.
Lutz, that's it. Good work, man. Good work.
I had met people like him as well. And I just connected with it. I've been asked numerous times on this channel that age-old question, what's your favorite war film? And I always respond with, well, my favorite film is actually a TV show. It's Band of Brothers. Because I believe the term war film is an oxymoron. A film can depict a battle. Like, I really like Black Hawk Down. That's not entirely accurate. Right. It has some issues. I love Eric Bana, but dude, this is my safety. Come on, get real.
Right.
You actually I don't care if you're Delta Force, you put your safety catch on.
Right.
But that is a great depiction of modern combat, a battle. Because within a 2 or even 3 hour running time, you cannot depict the experience of war. War is not a battle.
Right.
So there has never been a film in the history of cinema that is a good war film. The only one that comes close is something that you introduced me to very recently, and that's the Big Red One
Reconstruction, yeah, which is key. Yeah. That comes close. That was, making this a 10-part, 10-hour miniseries makes it the only piece of World War II media that can truly depict war as opposed to the details of a battle. So, I think the term war film is redundant at this point. Right. Yeah. I always had a lot of respect for not so much, obviously, the delivery of it is dated, but I did respect, as by the book as they are pastiches in the characters themselves most of the time. But in the 60s, it seemed like movies like Battle of Britain, The Longest Day, there's a few others, A Bridge Too Far in the 70s, like that, where they said, you know what, we just want to get the dates, times, and locations correct. Which is funny because now that they over-index on characters and individuals, they start to lose the eye for keeping the dates and times correct all the time. It's weird how storytellers continually shift what they prioritize from decade to decade. But Werewolf by Lunchtime, thank you for the super chat. He says, my granddad was in 1 and 2. He never spoke about it, and I never asked. He will always be a hero to me. Was your grandfather Jack Churchill, by the way? Just curious. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, my grandfather, he passed away in the early 90s, 91 or 92, I want to say. Whereas my grandmother didn't pass away until 2020. And it was years and years after his passing. It was coming up to, I think it was the 60th anniversary of D-Day. So 2004, I was living back in England, and I used to go and visit my grandmother once a week and have dinner with her. Because all of this was in the news about the 60th anniversary of D-Day, I started asking my grandmother. I knew my granddad was in the Navy, but he never talked much about it.
Right.
And I said, look, I was given his medals when he passed away. I would really like to get them framed with some photos of him and maybe a little bit of a write-up about what he did during the war. Do you have any information? And she pulled out this old metal tin, which was a World War II first aid kit that they used to keep in the air raid shelters.
Right, yeah.
And she opened it up, and it was full of black and white photographs, his service record, demobilization papers, all of that stuff. And she had some really beautiful photographs of him in, not in dress uniform, but he was actually quite a handsome guy. So he ended up with a job where they wanted him to model the newest British Navy drill manual just after the war. So she had all these nice photographs of him with a 303 rifle and a chrome bayonet doing the present arms, the addies, the attention. So I took these photos, but then I start reading up. And here's me thinking my granddad spent World War II on a naval ship, didn't really do a lot. He drove landing craft at Sword Beach on D-Day.
Wow.
And I learned of this for 13 or 14 years after he passed away.
Holy crap, man.
Yeah.
That's massive. Like, that's he was first wave. I mean, and then second, and then third. You know,
I've managed to track down one of his comrades from his service time who was still alive, and I traveled to his town to kind of talk to him just to do this write up for this framed picture I wanted to do with his medals. And when I spoke to him, he said that him and my granddad Jack were always annoyed that he was in the first wave that went to the beach, right? And they laid all these smoke grenades so they couldn't see anyone. We're getting way off Band of Brothers now.
No, it's the same day. Same day.
He said that the Germans didn't know what was going on at first. So the first wave of landing craft actually landed with that, and the Germans never opened fire because they didn't know what the hell was happening.
Right.
Then the second wave came in and they opened fire. And these guys were given certain medals because they were the first British naval and army guys to come under fire from the Germans. And he was like, we were first, and the guys who came second got the medals. It always annoyed him.
Yeah. Well, the Germans hesitating in that moment led to a mythology that it's taken me years amongst various friends I've had. I fight this battle, no pun intended. I fight this battle probably once a year with people who, and this goes all the way back to when I was in England and went and visited Normandy, several times. And that myth was going around that I'm sure you've heard this. Stop me if you've heard this one, Tony, that Sword, Gold, and Juno beaches weren't all that bad. And it's like, huh? Like, what? And I guarantee you it comes from the Germans just hesitating on that first wave, and then the telephone game happens, and then down through the decades, people are like, yeah, they didn't even get fired on. And it's like, no, it was really bad. Like it was really awful. Like, let's not joke around. Wes Robinson, thank you for the super chat. He says, 2 of my favorite YouTubers and one of my favorite TV shows. No questions. Just thanks for the great conversation content. Keep it up. You're welcome, Wes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gerard O'Connor, thank you for the super chat. He said, the scene in Band of Brothers when the soldiers fade away and are gone, I'll never forget. Such a great show. Yep. And I will tell you that due to my affinity for the RAF, every time I see BOB, my first thought is Battle of Britain. But then I have to reset because we're talking about Band of Brothers. That's not a criticism of you, Gerard. That's the right acronym for this. And then I believe we have Wes Robinson. Thank you for the super chat. He says, my granddad was in World War II as a forward observer in the Pacific Front. earned 2 silver stars, 3 bronze stars, and 2 purple hearts. Second one took him out of the war. 14-inch mortar shrapnel scar on his back. Wow. Fighter, man. Fighter. So talking about the show, Band of Brothers. So now we're in the middle of D-Day, and we're seeing the chaos we've always read about, but we're seeing it for the first time really depicted from a paratrooper's point of view. I don't know about you, but I just rewatched the second episode. I have the whole thing memorized, but I just rewatched the second one just to kind of get, in the mode for this talk. That shot of Winters coming out of the plane when the light goes green and it kind of sort of follows him down in a sense. I appreciated it at the time, but I really appreciate now how well done that sequence is just from a technical perspective. I'm like, there are very few seam lines at all in this sequence. It really holds up 20 years later. I mean, I know a lot of people talk about the Omaha Beach thing in Private Ryan, but the way those planes were going down, and it's always harder in a period film to depict air combat and stuff.
Yeah.
I was actually gripping my palms. I was white knuckling my own palms at one point just about an hour ago. Did it grab you the same way, or am I just crazy?
No, it 100% did. And I think it's like you talk about the seam lines, that really doesn't even come into it for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't look at, because of the show's creators made such the perfect choice. He was the right person to follow from the plane to the ground.
Right.
It was something that we had never seen before or since.
Mm-hmm.
And literally the time it takes for him to get out of the plane and hit the ground, that's really what real parachuting is like.
Right.
It's only a few seconds. It's not a long, protracted experience, unless you're doing, halo jumping or all that kind of thing.
Right.
Paratroopers are traditionally static line jumping at like 600 or 800 feet.
Mm-hmm.
You jump out. They used to train us that you would do this drill where the minute you stepped out of the plane, it would be 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 check canopy.
Oh, wow.
So that was basically, you would do the 3-second count to give yourself enough time for your chute to deploy, and then you would go up and you would check canopy. If there was an issue with the canopy, then it was look, locate, operate, and you would operate your reserve parachute at the front. Something I'm glad I've never had to do. My canopy always deployed. Some terrific choices by the screenwriters, the producers, whoever it was. He was the right person to follow. The fact that he lands with nothing because of the leg. Does that whole leg bag thing smack to you of you worked in corporate America for a long time?
Yeah.
Does that smack to you of a corporate knee-jerk reaction to maybe like a safety incident that happened in the workplace?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to say that because I didn't want to assume for a moment that corporate bureaucracies were anything like military bureaucracies. I did not want to venture there, but since you're in the room, since you're in the room, I also wonder if it had to do with glider training, where they thought the leg bag was, and I'm assuming, I don't know, but what if they thought the leg bag was more efficient for guys that were in gliders because they weren't going to have to jump out of the plane. They were gliding to the ground on D-Day. So I wonder if they were like, well, this will work for some of our paratroopers as well, or somebody got the count wrong and they were like, we actually made more leg bags for the glider para than we did the backpacks for the actual para. So we're gonna have to issue those. I don't know, but it's one of those random tragic mistakes. Like, can you? I can't imagine. You probably can. I can't. Landing in behind enemy lines at night in an unfamiliar countryside, knowing you have an objective and none of your equipment makes it. I mean,
well, the terrifying thing is, which I have done. I've landed behind enemy lines, in a modern day conflict,
right,
with all my equipment, and it's terrifying.
Right.
Imagine you get out and all you've got is a compass next to your dick.
Yeah, right.
Like,
right. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. And I just realized I talked about Dick's dick. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
May he rest in peace, Major Winters.
I've got clips here that are gonna test YouTube's ability to keep up with me. So don't you worry.
Well, I will say, as we are now 45 minutes in, and we're just scratching the surface of episode 2, if you would be willing to accommodate me again, I would love to do a part 2 and possibly part 3, because I don't think we're going to get through this whole thing.
Oh yeah, I didn't think we would either. I was definitely taking you up on that initial suggestion. So this is like us just getting into Band of Brothers. The only mistake I made in doing all this was that I forgot to put part 1 talk on the thumbnail. So I'll have to go back and change the thumbnail after it's over.
You don't need to change that until we make a part 2.
Oh, right. Good point.
Up until then, your audience on YouTube is just going to go, oh, Michael and Tony talking about Band of Brothers. Let's watch this. And then they're going to be at the end, they go, oh, part 2's coming in 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, you're talking about where we are talking about the leg bag and the bureaucracy and things like that. But also, you mentioned earlier Big Red 1, which for any of you who haven't seen the reconstruction, yes. I think Big Red 1, while it doesn't achieve what Band of Brothers achieves because it doesn't last as long. It's still only about a 3 hour plus movie. But what it does achieve, I think, in many ways, and it was, I think, one of the very first war films to do this by a guy who was there. In other words, the director had actually been in the war. It really captures the randomness of being in prolonged combat over many months, because it's not all bang, bang, bang. A lot of it is like sitting and waiting and seeing really random crap and going, what the like, it's so crazy, the random things that happen. So I wanted to pull up a clip here from the attack on the artillery cannons in the Bocage country. And it's this, I cut the 2 clips together real fast because, one, to avoid the copyright thing, but also to just condense the whole thing. Otherwise, we'd just be sitting here watching TV, which is fine. Great show. But this is one of the random things that out of the book I found out, it actually happened.
Grenade! Stop! Joyce, roll out! Roll out! One lucky bastard, Joe. Grenade! Toy! Let's go! Get out of there! Get out of there! Joe! Jesus Christ. Fucking twice.
So the guy literally survived on the first day of D-Day. He survived 2 close shaves in the same gun battle with grenades. Like he was stuck with a grenade, and twice he didn't get a scratch. That kind of randomness happens all the time in prolonged war and engagements. But there's also the other kind of randomness too, but this is combat randomness. The way they depict, and I know there's people out there who are sticklers for period accuracy and things like that, which they do in spades. I heard a nasty rumor that the whole reason Band of Brothers was even greenlit was because they had so much equipment left over from Saving Private Ryan and wanted to find a way to get their money's worth out of it, which may or may not be true. I don't know. But so they do the World War II thing very accurately as far as the equipment, the uniform, the guns, this, that. But they also do, I just think the general, when they used to make movies about war, it was a different filmmaking style where, it was very like master shots and then large like helicopter or crane shots showing big masses of tanks or whatever, or people running up on the beach, like in Longest Day, things like that. Now it's down and it's frenetic. Not so frenetic like the Bourne Supremacy, where you can't tell what the is going on. Like, but it's
or any Liam Neeson film in the last 10 years.
Right. But it almost feels like every camera shot in it is from the perspective of another random soldier who's just looking in the direction of the people you're looking at, because there's just enough kind of movement where you're like, is this Call of Duty? And this was before Call of Duty, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's like, huh? What did you think of the way they filmed it from a filmmaking perspective? Like, what did you think of the way they filmed the combat in this show?
Man, I'm going to be talking a lot about my own experiences here.
That's fine. That's fine. Whatever, however you want to answer it.
I still suffer from flashbacks from Iraq. Like a lot of what you saw in the Desert Rat short film, that was amped up for entertainment purposes. But
right,
you know, I don't have like daily flashbacks when I'm awake. I have dreams more, or nightmares, I should say. The way this was filmed, you know, boots on the ground, in the trenches, shaky cam, desaturated, it looks like my flashbacks. It's almost as though the cinematographer was able to get inside the heads of Bill Garnier, Joe Toy, Buck Compton, and said, show me what your flashbacks look like, and I'll just put that on screen, which sounds really simple.
Right.
But it isn't.
But it's not.
I'm telling you that those real life characters would have had a great amount of difficulty watching the finished program. Because of how much it is, not just how realistic it is, but how it is so their point of view.
Right.
I also want to do a shout out to Popeye here as well. He gets shot in the ass.
Yes.
And he apologizes for getting hit.
Yes.
And then you have that great interview with Major Winners. I can't remember if it's in the last episode or if it's in the documentary, but where he actually gets really emotional because one of his guys says sorry to him for getting shot.
Right.
And how special that meant to him. It's
yeah. I know, and to that end, there is. I don't know if I have a picture of him or not. I don't think I got a picture of him. I couldn't find one, but in this same engagement right here in the bocage, which is also where this photo comes from, you have this character that we mentioned earlier named Hall, and he's from Able Company, and he met up with Winters right as they landed. They were both out of their drop zones. Hall was a private. Hall makes mention of the fact that he was able to hold on to his Thompson because it was around his body, but his leg bag also got lost along with his radio. And he was like the radio guy. And he said, my CO is going to chew me out for this or something like that. And he's like, well, you know, maybe not, you know, because we're all in the suck together. He didn't say that, but I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And there's this very evident character development where Hall, this private, he's already expressed the difficulty of being under his own CO and how petty the guy seems to be about these kind of things. And he immediately wants to be part of Winters' company. Like he starts making himself useful and, you know, he's got a Thompson gun. He's a good soldier. He knows how to follow orders. He's not a screw up or anything like that. And, you know, he wants to go with them on the mission to take out the guns, but he doesn't at first. And then he shows up with an officer from his company later with the TNT, and he starts helping Winters out. And then an unfortunate chance event, and he gets killed. I've never been able to tell if he got killed by a booby trap in the bunker or if he got killed by a gunshot or something. It was very hard to tell because he runs down into that bunker, and then you just see this and hear this flash explosion, and then
I think a grenade goes off. I think a grenade goes off just as he runs in,
right?
And looking because he has like a shrapnel type wound in his face, which looks more like shrapnel than a bullet wound. So that's what I kind of think happened there, or that's what they were depicting.
And there's that moment where Winters goes running in, not because he knows anything's happened to Hall, but because now it's time for him to go through there, and he finds him. And he's so disappointed because the way I interpret the scene is that he's such a natural leader and he's such a good leader. And he's been with this guy all night, like all night into the day, right? He's gotten to know this guy under the most rapid circumstances you can imagine, the biggest pressure cooker to get to know someone you can. And there's like this whole disappointment on his face of losing such a good guy. Like, in other words, like, it looks like he had real admiration for this kid, you know, and to know that that moment always gets me. Like, this is going to sound really shallow, all right, as a comparison, but when I was a kid, I would always turn off Raiders of the Lost Ark right after Indy got the truck to the town and the Nazis couldn't find the truck, right? And because I didn't want to see, as a kid, I didn't want to see everybody melt. Like, I didn't want to see that. It was like, I could watch it, but it was like, I don't want to. Band of Brothers, to this day, that one moment does bother me. And it bothers me because it's supposed to. But it's like, it has that end of Raiders moment where I'm like, oh, do I look away? Do I skip it? Do I scrub by it? I hate this moment, you know, but I always end up watching it through.
There's, I have a similar moment in the series, but it comes in during the Bastogne episodes. But yeah, I know what you mean. And it's just that the little subtle gestures, he waves at the side of his face, and it looks to me like he's brushing flies away.
He's brushing a fly. You hear a fly buzzing right before he does it, and he gets real.
And you're like, this guy just got killed by a German grenade on D-Day +1.
Right.
No, on D-Day. Sorry.
D-Day, yeah.
On D-Day, you know, storming the German artillery at Breakhall Manor.
Yeah.
And it's almost as though he's like, he doesn't want Hall to experience that final insult of, and now a fly is gonna,
right?
And that gesture, I think it's that little gesture that really gets me. But that whole sequence, the way the attack went down, going back to what you were saying before, how Hall all of a sudden, having followed Winters for a few hours, is now like, I don't want to go back to Able Company because this guy knows his shit. I want to follow this guy.
Right.
And I've always believed there's this common phrase in the British military that you can't teach someone to be a leader. Right. There are born leaders, and then there's everybody else.
Yes.
Winters was a born leader. Unfortunately, seems like, you know, the CEO of Able Company was possibly more like a Sobel than a Winters. Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I had totally forgotten to play a moment that I pulled that shows Winters' leadership. And it's during the first episode where Sobel has decided that he's going to make Winters his whipping boy. And this is before Sobel gets taken out. When I say taken out, he's told, you're not going to be leading Easy Company on D-Day. You know, you're going to go train paratroopers here. There's this moment where he tries to literally engineer a reprimand on Winters. He literally sets up the chess pieces to... Winters is a by the number soldier. He's reliable. He doesn't miss a beat. And Sobel arranges a situation that makes it impossible for Winters to actually succeed at this very petty daily task. And so then Sobel decides, now I'm going to throw the book at him because I resent what these guys did to me. Not Winters didn't do it, but the other guys, you know, imitating the commander so that he would,
because he knew that by doing this to Winters was going to hurt the guys who embarrassed him, because that dog just ain't gonna hunt.
Right, yeah.
Which is my favorite line in the whole show, by the way.
Oh, that dog just won't hunt. Yeah. My inner Tennessee can deliver some of that. So this is just a very brief moment from that really shows Winters' integrity.
Or you may initiate a letter of appeal and request a trial by court-martial. You spend your weekends on the base anyway, Dick. Be a man, take the punishment.
My endorsement, sir. I request trial by court-martial.
it makes me want to cheer every time he does. Every time I see that scene, it's like, oh, yes, call his bluff.
Look, throughout my 44 years on this earth, I have that moment is the only time I have like desired to be a ginger, freckled, pasty man. I'm like, I want to be him. Right. If I was a quarter of the man that is, I would walk around like the biggest gangster in town. You know?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Michael Schaefer, I just want to tell you, I can send you links, sir. If you'd like to see more interviews with those guys, many were done. A lot of them are on YouTube. They're not part of the official production of Band of Brothers, but they did interviews. I will be happy to send you links. Just remember, you're there to listen to those guys respond to questions. Some of the interviewers themselves, not so great, but they know how to bring out, answers and stuff. Zigma Experiment, thank you for the super chat. He says, I would recommend reading both The Shetland Bus and We Die Alone by David Hoarth about a covert Norwegian resistance operation. One of the guys was the most decorated Allied officer of World War II. I will look those up, Zigma. Thank you so much. And then Toy Guy, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No. Do the super chat.
Toy Guy Chad, thank you for the super chat. He says, Winters says to Hall, if you were in my company, I'd tell you were a rifleman first. That's right. He does say that to Hall.
Yep.
That's 100%. Right. What were you going to say, Tony?
I was just saying, I'm glad Michael Schaefer brought up the interviews, because I can't remember. I think most of the episodes start with some interviews, except the first episode, maybe, or is it the last episode where the interviews are? But another very, very smart decision from the showrunners here is to not tell you who these people are until the final episode, because I read the book probably a couple of years after the show first aired 20 years ago.
Me too.
Yeah, I didn't know the story, but had you have read the book or whatever, you would know who lived and who died. But what I remember that final episode where the interviews come at the end after, I think they're in Austria, and all of a sudden the names start coming up and you're like, oh, that's that guy. And you're like, gee, but Bill Garnett, he had his leg blown off and he's still alive.
Right.
He's like just this tough SOB from Philadelphia with his bottom lip like this.
Yeah.
Man, what a human being.
Yeah. It's unreal. It is unreal. And Movie Oubliette, thank you, Conrad. He says there are a lot more interviews on the Blu-ray set as well, which is...
Are there?
Do you not see
on this Blu-ray set?
I guess. Yeah, I think so. The Blu-ray set's the same. They've never done a different one.
All right, I'm watching some Band of Brothers interviews today.
Let's see. To that end, as this is obviously, there's a lot of people in the chat who haven't seen Band of Brothers before, and they're all saying they now want to watch it, which is awesome. I can't wait for all these people to start watching it. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate that. I pulled a few clips as well that are they're probably not from episodes where we're going to get to tonight. However, they're not clips that are necessarily terribly revealing. They're just more these little random bits. And so as we dig into this series of discussions next time, which is awesome, we're not about to end anytime soon, but I just wanted to pull this up. There are moments of levity in the show that are factually based. And like we just saw with them tricking Sobel into thinking that the commanding officer was yelling at him about the cattle fence. There's this one moment here, which is during Market Garden, which we'll talk about probably in a future episode. I just love this moment. And when I found out in the book, because like you, I read the book a few years later, when I found out this thing actually happened, this moment actually happened, I was like, you gotta be, it made me really respect the show even more. It's one of those deals where as I continued to learn more about what they bothered to get right, aside from some inaccuracies in the show that are quite baffling just from a procedural perspective, my admiration for the show only grew net. You know, like, so this moment right here is just crazy.
How bad? I don't know yet. Thanks! I'm all right. I'm all right. Am I all right? Yeah. Yeah, you feel all right? Yeah, quit looking at me like that.
The fact that guy actually, I mean, just this round that somebody was trying to snipe his head off, and it just hit that helmet at just the right way and just went through it, didn't even touch him, you know. And I love the continuity of the fact that for quite a while after that, he still wears that helmet with the hole through it. He eventually gets a replacement, but I love that stuff. I know that sounds shallow, but it's not, because that attention to detail in this is so, at times it's very exacting, and then I've learned that at other times it's kind of a head scratcher. So like when we get to the one about Bastogne and probably the next episode, I found out that, you know, all the paratroopers who ran into the combat zone right before they were surrounded, they all ripped off their airborne insignias because they didn't want the Germans to know that the Germans were facing an elite group. They wanted the Germans to think they were just facing General Army. And yet in the show, I'm sure for identification purposes for the audience and stuff like that, they leave their patches on, which that's just one little example of a procedural thing. So Tony, tell me a little bit about where do you see this thing in thirds, or do you see it in kind of a different, is there an act 1, act 2, act 3 in your mind? Or is it, and before we go, I just gotta find
Whoa.
I know, right? Raymond,
wow.
you're too kind, Raymond. He says, loved the Ambrose book and the series. One of my favorite aspects were books written afterward by Easy Company vets and their opinions of Band of Brothers. Yes. One of my favorites was when Buck Compton said he smiled seeing himself playing darts for cigarettes since he never smoked. Yeah. It's that kind of stuff. It's that kind of stuff. And also there's that beautiful moment right as they're pulling up to the dispersal area when they're getting ready to leave for D-Day, and Winters and Compton are in the Jeep, and he's kind of new to the company, and he was gambling with all the guys, and Winters, you know, says, look, he goes, I know you're trying to get to know the guys. He's like, but you can't be gambling with them. And he's like, what's the big deal? He goes, we were all having a good time. I just got to get to know them. He goes, don't ever put yourself in a position where you can take from these men. And I mean, that lands like a lead brick. Like, it's just like, you know, something I've kept in mind ever since I've watched that show. It's actually I don't know about you, but for me, it's one of the overriding tenets that guides everything I do with this channel as far as my audience goes. Like, you know, I don't put myself in a position where I load them down with ads, and all of that comes back from that line where it's like, don't put yourself in a position to take from people you care about, you know. Anyway,
see, I learned a lot of my moral compass points in a certain direction.
Yep.
And I used to joke back in the day that I had a bubble in my moral compass because I was a bit of a reprobate. But the reason my moral compass points the way it does is because my own father was very good at delivering life advice. I think a lot of the other things that have influenced my moral compass have come from Damian Lewis's portrayal of Major Winters.
Yes.
And when he says, don't ever put yourself in a position where you can take from these men.
Yeah.
I heard that maybe 6 months before I went on Special Forces selection.
Wow.
I actually, honest to God, when I was marching across the Brecon Beacon Mountains, trying to pass selection, I would have Major Winters' voice in my head from watching the TV show.
Right.
And, you know, that was, I was trying to emulate this man. So, you know, when he says, don't ever put yourself in a position where you can take from these men, that's why I haven't started a GoFundMe to get to Joe Fest.
Right. You got me. You had me going, and then I was just like, wait a minute, what? Oh, he tricked me. Wow, we have a VFX artist from Band of Brothers right here in the house right now. DKG Custom, thank you for watching the stream. And
wow,
yeah, and thank you for doing the show. I mean, thank you for putting your talents into that show. I mean, that's a feather in your cap. You should be very proud. You should be very proud of your work on that show.
Yeah.
One of the best things ever made, even with all of its little foibles. It doesn't make anywhere near the foibles other films do. And I know I've been harping on this a little bit. I promise in our next episode I won't so much. I can't make that promise, but because I love this show. It is my favorite World War II anything. I do find it to be compared to everything else that's come before it. It is nearly flawless. I do believe it is 80% there, which none of these other movies get close. My big gripe about Private Ryan is that it sets itself up in its structure, its marketing, and the way that it purports itself and presents itself to the audience as authentically historical, when in fact it is total fiction. Whereas this show, on the other hand, it's like, no, these are the real names. These are the real guys. Here are the veterans at the beginning talking about their experience. And so in one way, I say that's why I hold this on a very high pedestal. But it also means that when the Hollywood guys, in the moments where they do deviate from very simple details that they had no reason not to change or had no reason to change, I do kind of look crossways and go, you guys had the whole thing going. You had everything going. You were 80%. You could have easily been 90% before this was over, but you guys made these weird decisions. Like, we're talking about the early Carentan or the early D-Day episodes. The third episode, Carentan, I believe is the one with Blythe, if I recall. Obviously, we've already talked about how Blythe doesn't actually die, even though it says in the show that he does. For all of you out there who watch the show for the first time, it's a good kind of spoiler. Just know that Blythe was a real person, like all these other guys. He actually lived and got back to the States, and he had a fairly long life, and as we all hope to accomplish. But another little detail in that episode that relates directly to Blythe, so I keep wondering if the writer of that particular episode was just too self-indulgent, was the Edelweiss flower that's on the German that he finds. And then they tell this story about how, the elite mountain troops of the German army, they have to climb this mountain and get this flower. Well, that guy wasn't an elite mountain troop. He was a German para. And so what I've read is that not only did they not actually have the literal flower, they put a badge on their cap, their service cap. It was an actual patch that said, I've acquired the Edelweiss. They would have never wanted that to be co-opted by a different branch of the service. So there are those little things like that where they're trying to get in a real factoid, but they kind of wedge it into an inaccurate situation. So you're learning something, but it's not in the right context, which is interesting. Anyway.
Can you pull up Melinda's comment?
I can.
Not the highest. Yeah, this. No,
not that one.
Where she's talking about Damian Lewis.
Okay.
Yeah. She says also, I've got to say, Damian Lewis is just gorgeous, regardless that he's a pale ginger guy. He's great in everything he's in. Yeah. I have a man crush on Damian Lewis ever since he portrayed Dick Winters. Like, talk about making ginger hair and freckles sexy. That guy nails it. Yeah. He is cool, calm, and collected. I mean, the guy just does such a great job. I agree, movie Oubliette. I'd love to get it in 4K. I would love to get this in 4K. And DKG Custom is going to drop a link to his Band of Brothers show reel. Awesome. I can't wait to see it. Wow.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So speaking of Damian Lewis playing Winters so well, I'm going to jump to a little out of context clip from another episode. Doesn't really give anything away about the episode. I pulled together a lot of just favorite moments for this particular conversation because I didn't know where it was going to go. This is after Winters has been promoted to captain. And so, as always, in every bureaucratic system. When they find out you're really, really good at something, they immediately promote you and take you away from it because, as we all know, middle management is full of idiots. And when they see someone who's smart, they take them away from the thing they're good at and try and hope to God that they are a better middle manager than everybody else. So he's now a captain in this scene, and he and Nixon, who was the guy shot through the helmet a few scenes ago,
the intelligence officer,
yes, they're discussing concerns about a lieutenant in their company that's not quite hacking it, and the guys, the troops aren't that happy with him. So here comes one of my favorite clips. It's only a piece of the clip, but it's one of my favorite clips. Is this the right one? I hope this is the right clip, because if it's not, this is not the right clip. I almost played the wrong clip. Here we go. Here it is.
Division's not gonna let me replace him just because I got a bad feeling about him. Even if they would, who'd I put in his place? Shams?
Do not ever talk when I'm talking, you got that?
Shams seen too many war movies, thinks he has to yell all the time.
It's just, whoever the director was on that particular episode really understood how to get legitimate, scene-specific but relevant comedy through the editing, the cutting, and the conversation. I love that whole moment, and I haven't shown you guys the whole thing, so if you haven't seen it, it hasn't been spoiled for you. There's more to it. But I love that whole moment where he's like, I don't know, this guy, like, he just yells all the time. Like, he's just crazy. I don't want to promote him. Oh man,
it really does surprise me when you were. I'm not paying too much attention to the chat, but you were saying earlier that there's a lot of people in the chat who haven't seen this show.
Right.
I never in my life thought I would ever tell anyone to not watch Retro Blasting, but if you haven't seen this show, don't watch this live stream. Watch the show.
Right. Yeah.
I have so much respect for it that you cannot go through life and not learn about the stories of the Men of Easy Company.
Right.
Through this visual medium that is the 10-part miniseries Band of Brothers, because it is that amazing. And the thing that really strikes me right now is that how are you and I even talking about this when we hate everything?
I know we're just these guys that just hate everything, but we absolutely love this series and a lot of the peripheral things around it that we've discovered. You know, I was thinking the other day about the weird paths you take as a child and then into teenage years when it comes to the media that you watch, and how you find yourself suddenly watching things that 5 years before you thought were just boring and you'd never watch them. You wouldn't even pick them up in the video store, but then they lead you down a path. And so I was thinking about it the other day and I'm like, okay, so The Great Escape led to The Longest Day. This is for me as a child. The Great Escape led to The Longest Day. The Longest Day led to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly led to Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence of Arabia primed the pump for me for Band of Brothers, because I saw it before Band of Brothers came out. It was years before. But by that time, those movies had taught me these historicals are really great stories and you should always give them a chance when they come out, you know, because some of them are like Lawrence and this one are really, really, really good. And I'm so grateful because I know so many guys our age that, and I don't mean to belittle anybody at all. It happens. I get it. It happens. But there's so many guys our age who I see lamenting how lackluster the umpteenth Star Wars sequel was, or they're lamenting the fact that they didn't like, you know, the latest iteration of Star Trek or whatever. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. They're not wrong. But what I'm always fascinated by is to say, you know, I think the reason that I just kind of look at it dispassionately with a lot of sarcasm for the sake of humor when I talk about those things is because I have so much other fun stuff that I know is great that I've been watching. And then I mention something like Band of Brothers or Lawrence of Arabia or something like that. And it's like, I ain't never seen it. And it's like, yeah, a lot of guys our age haven't watched this stuff. And so no wonder they feel like there's a hole in them, you know, entertainment wise. And, you know, I don't mean to get on a soapbox, but Robert Chambers, thank you for the super chat. He says, great stream. Love what you both do. Can't make the convention in June, so I'll be sending you both some of the money I would have spent. Love this video and others. Please, Tony, you are a hot guy too.
Oh, wow.
That is a lot in one super chat, but thank you. I take it with the sentiment in which it was delivered.
And you know why I'm hot? It's because I've got Michael and Melinda on my shirt.
No, he's hot because he has a DeLorean on his shirt and the air conditioning in it has failed. And you can't roll the windows down. It's just that kind of car. Oh, and then he sends another super chat. He says, I've read the book and my folks have the series, so I'll be using their copies. Thanks for the recommendation. It's Robert. It's really, really a well done adaptation. There are some changes to it, but not very many. Tony is.
Oh, Conrad, you're making me blush. You are far more handsome than I am, Conrad.
Conrad, I swear, is some sort of alternate timeline version of Ray Fiennes that somehow deja vu happened or a glitch in the Matrix, and now he's coexisting with the other Ray Fiennes. It's very strange.
I see Conrad, and it's like if you took Ray Fiennes and dialed up the sexy to 110%.
Oh yeah, yes, Conrad. Absolutely, yeah. Conrad has a far superior hairline to the actual Ray Fiennes. And I love Ray Fiennes. Don't get me wrong, Ray Fiennes awesome. So
honestly, the next James Bond film should be Idris Elba as Bond and Conrad as M.
Oh, I would go see that in a heartbeat. I would see that in a heartbeat. Can you imagine that trailer? Everybody else is like, wow, who's the new actor playing M? And I'm the one guy in the corner in the theater that's like, woohoo! Like I stand up. Let's see. You know what? Let me look over here real quick. I've pulled some other content for this stream. I don't want to do anything since I don't want to pull anything that might be heavier from episodes we haven't talked about yet. But let's see. What do I have here? Oh, okay. I love this moment right here because I have this thing, and I loved the fact that, and I'm sure they're still in squads to this day. I'm sure they are. I don't know because I don't understand that newfangled rifle technology. You know, like if it don't have wood on it, I don't get it. You know, but I love the idea that back in the day they had their snipers, but they also had their sharpshooters who just used iron sights and were just really good with their rifle.
Yeah.
And so from watching Band of Brothers, I became really fascinated by Shifty Powers. I thought Shifty was just one of the coolest cats in the room because he was just an iron sight guy who was from the South, and I was from the South. And so I was kind of like, oh, finally, there's a Southern guy in a show, and he doesn't totally suck. And he was also really good with a rifle with iron sights. Well, that was the one thing I could do at Boy Scout camp where I didn't embarrass my dad. Like, for some reason, I was only okay at tying knots. Wasn't a disaster, but I wasn't great at it. Didn't like swimming in a dirty lake. That wasn't me. But you put me in the rifle range and just give me a 22, and I can hit those targets all day. I don't know why. I just could. So I love this moment from one of the later episodes because it also shows the thing they talked about in Big Red 1. Do you remember that scene, Tony, in Big Red 1 where the narrator is talking about, he said, see if I can quote this right. He says, you know how you flush out a sniper? You send one of your guys out and you see if he gets shot. He's like, they thought that up at West Point. He's like, I'd love to meet the asshole that came up with it. This is one of my favorite little moments.
I know what clip you're going to show now.
Oh, you do? Okay, here we go.
Second floor, building on the right. Don't miss Shifty. Man!
I mean, the tension. I mean, I've seen so many World War II movies, so I've seen that maneuver have to happen so many times. And yet, knowing that in that particular moment, they pulled that from some story or something where I have to go back and read the book again, but that kind of thing's real. And they had to do that all the time in this particular production. It just gives me chills. It's just, I don't know.
And when you think about, by this stage, he's a first sergeant, isn't he? Lipton, First Sergeant Lipton.
Yes.
He obviously becomes an officer later on. He gets commissioned in the field. When you think about him turning to Shifty, going, okay, for the next 30 seconds, I'm putting my entire life and existence in your hands.
Right.
And he says it so matter of fact, like, don't miss, Shifty. And it just starts running.
Yes.
And and for anyone who wonders why, when you see the interviews of the real life guys, you know, when they're in their 80s and 90s, and the love they have for each other, that's where it comes from.
Yeah. Yeah.
These men would have led lives where I'm sure they loved their wives, but their wives would have always come second to Muck and Pinkala and Shifty and Joe. Yeah. If I was in the war with Joe Toy, I would ride and die with that man, and my wife and children would always be. I would take care of them, but they would always be second best.
Yeah,
so,
which is what we see, you know, later on with Garnier. Garnier and Toy have that real connection, you know.
We need to talk about that in part 2.
Oh yes, we will. That's why I only mention. Melinda says, "Retroblasting, how dare you? What about Cage?" Well, I absolutely love Cage, Melinda. You know I love the TV show Combat. It goes like this. It goes if we're talking about World War II stuff, it's Band of Brothers, Big Red 1, the Reconstruction, and then all 5-6 seasons of Combat. And even though Combat is a complete fiction, at least it doesn't try to purport itself. It tries to be a historical fiction, but it never tries to tell you that it's based on reality. It's telling you, we're showing you scenarios and situations, and we're also going to talk about, you know, some other themes in this show, but it's a very, very well done show that holds up very well to this day. Wicked Person, thank you for the super chat. He says, me to the class watching episode 2, and the language is historically accurate. Sometimes when people get shot, they swear a bit.
Jesus Christ, twice.
we have a request here. Part 2 should be about only spears only.
Dragon. If you want to watch a 5-hour live stream where I just gush.
I've got Spears clips right now that I'm now not going to show because we haven't gotten that far yet. Like I'm literally
no. I mean, we are just scratching the surface really of episode 3 because you brought up Carentan, Blythe. This miniseries is not perfect,
right?
And for me, my biggest issue was the portrayal of Blythe. I don't know how everyone else feels, but I feel this was episode 3 is, in a strange way, the weakest episode and one of the best episodes at the same time.
Because yes.
The actual Battle of Carentan, when, you know, Lutz and Shifty get pinned down, and once again, Winters is standing up in the middle of the road, kicking the guys in the ditches, going, move, move, move. I'm watching this, and this stuff's going around in my head when I'm on Special Forces selection. The way that, I think even at one point, Winters removes his helmet.
Yes.
So he's standing in the middle of the road without his helmet, so he can hit another guy with his helmet to get them to move. The same episode is then coupled with the story of Blythe, and I can't put my finger on what it is, but I did not like the actor's portrayal.
Yeah. Also,
he took me out of the story. That guy, he was
Yeah.
a little bit too daydreamy for me. It
Mhm.
was too.
He was
I don't like to, like yourself. I don't like to blame
Mhm.
actors for bad material, and I don't think the
Right.
material is bad. I actually think the actor didn't do a good job in this show.
And also, I think the writer was taking all those liberties, both with the historical character of Blythe to push his narrative of whatever he wanted. I don't mean like political narrative. I just simply mean what themes he wanted to explore and all that stuff. He clearly imprinted onto a historical person to the extent that we know he was happy to just tell everybody this guy died, when in point of fact, this guy did not die. His family had to come forward and be like, he lived for like, 50 years after the war or whatever it was, 40 or 50 years. He was our father, and he was, we got pictures of him, like, and they've never gone back and even changed the subtitle at the end to fix that. And so between that, the Edelweiss flower, all that kind of stuff, that's all from one writer. And so that writer was being way too self-indulgent with, it was almost like, I feel like when it came to the Blythe thing, that was where he was told, you can do this however you want, but Karen Tan has to happen in this episode, and we're going to handle that over here. So we're going to do Karen. I'm conjecturing here, but he's looking over here and he's going, ooh, well, I always really loved the Thin Red Line. I want to kind of have my own Thin Red Line storyline with this guy. So since this person isn't in the story later on, because he was wounded on D-Day +1 or 2 or 3 or whatever it was, and then he was sent back to the States. He's like, I'm just going to take liberties with this character and just make this guy whoever I need him to be. And you're right. It is one of the more really, like, I just don't think they did him or the show justice in that respect. Yeah. I loved sorry, go ahead.
Is that the same episode where they're holding the defensive line?
Yes,
and
at the very end.
It's the same episode, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a I really enjoy the way that was portrayed, how I think the first shots fired in that battle, one of the guys is picking up like a tin mug of coffee and gets hit, or am I confusing that with the Bastogne scene? I don't know.
No, it's hard to remember.
There's a lot to unpack in that episode, because that's when First Sergeant Grant gets bayoneted by one of his own men because he's wearing a German poncho.
Right.
You have Lieutenant Harry Welsh.
Yes.
Runs out of the trenches into the front to bazooka a German tank. Can you imagine going through the rest of your life meeting people at toy conventions or bars or dinner parties or wherever, and people can be telling these interesting anecdotes, and you just turn around and go, I bazookaed a German tank once.
Right? Like, yeah.
I bazookaed a German tank. That's the biggest mic drop of the 20th century.
Yes, it is. You can't beat that story in a room. It makes me.
And the weirdest thing though is the guy would never tell that story.
No, he would.
That's not who he was,
Right, and that's the whole thing. He's got the ultimate ace up his sleeve for any social situation where people are trying to impress with a story. But he's so cool, and it takes a guy that cool to bazooka a German tank. He's so cool at that point that he doesn't even have to play the card. He's just like, great, you shot a hole in one. Woohoo, like, whatever. Yeah. You're good at the links. Yay, Jim Largo, thank you for the super chat. He says, thanks, Michael and Tony. Band of Brothers is a great tool for fathers to show sons prime examples of manhood and valor. That's very true. That's very true.
Yeah, and speaking of fathers, one of the pieces, my dad got really drunk the night this is when I went into the Australian Army. 17 years old, out of high school. I was a combat engineer for 4 years.
Yep.
The night before I left home, me and my dad got drunk together, and he decided to lay these pearls of wisdom upon me. He's like, these are the 5 pieces of advice you need to go on through, man.
Right.
I can't discuss them all here because some of them are quite profane ridden. But one of them was, he said, when you go through life, son, never trust a man with a ponytail, because underneath every ponytail is an arsehole. And then I watched this show years later, and I was like, there's a reason why none of Easy Company have a ponytail.
Right. Yeah, like there were those guys in the 101st Airborne in another company that did like the Mohawk thing. But
that was the 82nd, I think.
That was 82nd? Okay, yeah.
But Mohawk, that's completely different.
Absolutely.
You want to fly into Nazi-occupied Europe with a Mohawk and war paint on your face? Dude, I'm buying you a beer every time I see you.
Sure. I mean, it was a great tactic for the Celts. I mean, so I say, go with what's been proven to work. I got no beef with the war paint and no, not at all.
I just got a beef with ponytails. But
can you imagine the stories that would have been running rife through the Wehrmacht after that? Getting back to the off the front line, where it's like, we have seen our first Americans, and they are crazy. They are monsters. They have the faces with the paint. They come out of the bushes and they yell and scream. I mean, it's a good psychological tactic. I'll say that much. So, Karantan. So, one thing I wanted to bring up in the episode right before Karantan, which is related to Spears, since we're kind of sort of loosely, I like how we're having a conversation about concepts and a conversation about, all this broader stuff as it relates to these episodes. I'm glad we're not doing the thing where it's like, and then there was the scene where, what did you think of that scene? I'm glad we're not doing that. So we have the beginning of a moment that then becomes a through line throughout the whole miniseries of Spears's reputation. So Spears goes and borrows cigarettes from Compton by stealing the pack. He doesn't steal it. The Compton's just like, hey, take the whole pack, I guess. He wanders off to a bunch of German soldiers who are freshly captured sitting by the road that Malarkey has just talked to. Malarkey has just found out that one of these guys was actually from Oregon, but he went back to join
Oregon.
Eugene, Oregon. Yeah.
That's how many times I've watched this show. I remember.
Right. Yeah. But he went back to join the fatherland when he got the call because his family was of German descent. So that's when Spears goes back, offers them all a bunch of cigarettes, and then it cuts back to Malarkey hearing Thompson machine gun fire. And the implication is now that not the literal thing is that the prisoners were shot. The buzz now through the show that will run on is, did Spears pull the trigger? And the rumor starts to run wild. What did you think of that? And I know I'm doing what I just said I wouldn't do, but I'm talking about big moments. I'm not talking about every little thing. What did you think about that as a setup for the rest of the series? Like, because Spears is a character that starts out in a very negative light by the way the filmmakers do it. Excuse me. And then he becomes this really awesome character for the audience in the doing, I guess.
Well, again, I'm going to lean on my own life experience. After I left the British Army, I went to Iraq and I worked private security, and I had a number of different jobs in the first year I was there. But then I fell into a job that I really, really enjoyed. And what had happened, I had been moved from Baghdad down to southern Iraq to be the new second in command of this reconnaissance team. And the team leader, who resigned from the company not long after, and I took over the job. But when I first arrived there, he was one of the oldest guys I'd ever worked with in Iraq. He was at the time, this is back in like 2008 or 9. He was in his mid-40s then, and he was a Falklands War veteran.
Oh, wow.
So ex-British paratrooper, fought at the Battle of Goose Green. Was it Goose Green or Mount Longdon? One of the two. He's actually discussed quite a lot in. There's a book called The Green-Eyed Boys. He's talked about in that book. So I arrived there, and me and him have an immediate connection because it turns out he's from my hometown in England. And through some conversation, discover that him and my uncle used to play football together in the early 1980s, late 70s, early 80s, before he went off and joined the parachute regiment. Anyway, I'm going a long way around to get from my ass to my elbow here.
Yep.
In the book, The Green-Eyed Boys, he was a private in 3 Para who had run out of ammunition during an attack on an Argentine position. And apparently, so the book says, he crawled on his belly all the way up to this machine gun emplacement. And then when some other guys laid down some covering fire, he charged over the top and bayoneted an Argentine fighter through the eye socket and killed him.
Wow.
That's the way it's depicted in this book. And one day I asked him, I've read this book. Is this true? And he's like, it's a pretty cool story. I'll just leave it out there. And that's the way he handled it. And then I'm thinking about Band of Brothers and Spears, and he's like, you know, maybe he thought there was some value in all of his guys thinking that he was the meanest, toughest son of a bitch in the whole ATO.
Well, it certainly serves you well in the campaign to kind of have the uncertainty of that. You know, like a lot of the guys throughout the show, you know, they've heard the rumors. They don't want to cross him. You know, he's a good officer. You know, he's not like, you know, incompetent.
Oh yeah.
But as we've seen from the second episode of the series, he does have unconventional tactics that get a lot of his men killed when he's going after that third gun at Breakcourt. And, you know, Winters is like, why is he getting out of the trench? Why? And you see him say, he turns around to his men and he's like, you guys get back down in the trench. I know what I'm doing. We don't know what he knows he's doing, but he, you know, all the other guys follow his lead and they all get shot. And he's the only one that lives out of his whole squad, which is like, wow, what a terrible waste of life. But at the same time, when you read the book, as you and I have done, you find out that Spears was like this guy that just had this very instinctive way of moving in a gun battle. Like he just knew how to move, and it was just this, like nobody else could. Like there was just this way he did things where he was untouchable. I mean, it was just, he was a one-man army. He was, you know.
Yeah, we call it situational awareness. And it is basically the ability to have all of your senses, your hearing, your sight, smell, touch, the whole lot. It's a guy who can absorb all of that and process it really, really quickly. To me, situational awareness, I can't walk down the street in a city without, I call it my spider sense tingles. If you'll get really frustrated if you ever walk down a city street with me, because I am continually crossing the road, because I am identifying and analyzing threats all the time, and it's making me avoid that. I'm all over the place. And Spears, I imagine, had that in space. I also kind of think that Spears possibly had a death wish.
Yeah, because he tells Blythe in the Quarantine episode, he says, you know, you've still got hope. That's why you're not functioning as a soldier. You've got to consider yourself already dead. Which, interestingly enough, Spears claimed he did not ever say that to anybody. That was like part of that writer's flowery whatever. I don't know if you've seen this interview, but it's on YouTube. You can watch it. It's not on the Blu-ray. It's a interview conducted by a different person with Winters, and it's after Band of Brothers comes out. And the guy asks him, is the whole thing about Spears true, that he shot all those guys? Because some of the companies of Para were told specifically before they ever left England, they were told, you guys don't have an infrastructure backing you up. You take no prisoners. You do not have the ability to round these guys up and hold them necessarily until we get base camps established and stuff. So on that first night, you know, obviously by that point they had a base camp established, which is why the guys were being held off by the road or whatever. But Steve Ambrose, who's working with the people on the show or whatever, this is before the show was even a thing. He's just writing the book, and he's getting to that point where the research has told him there was this running rumor that Spears had shot all these guys, all these Germans, in cold blood, German prisoners. And he said the publisher, he called Dick Winters, and he said, the publisher's really worried. I'm really worried. We're not sure if we can publish this, because we're worried about lawsuits. We're worried about lawsuits from people, families, whatever, if this is challenged or whatever. And Dick Winters says in the interview, he's like, he goes, this was when Ambrose was writing the book. So this was several years before so he says, that's no problem. He says, I know Sparky. They called him Sparky. They called Spears Sparky, which never comes up, I don't think, in the show, because they
no, I don't think it does in the show. Yeah.
So he's like, he and I are super close friends. I've been the one that got him promoted, you know, during Bastogne and all that kind of stuff, or after Bastogne, and put in for this. He goes, we're real close. He goes, we're so close to this day. I'll call him. And so he calls him up, and he says he got a hold of him, and he's like, hey, Sparky. He goes, so you know that running rumor, you know, for throughout the war that you shot all those German POWs? He's like, yeah, the publishers, the author are worried about a lawsuit, and they just want to confirm some things and get some things shored up. And Spears just interrupted him, and he goes, is that what they're worried about? He goes, well, do you want me to send him a letter? He goes, I'll do it. I'll send him a letter. I'm not going to sue anybody. It's all true. I mean, he's just like that. He's like, yeah, I did that. It's all true. Yeah. I'll send him a letter. And so he sends the publisher a letter, and Ambrose, and they had it in writing, and they're like, okay. And so they put it in the book. And that was the whole thing, is that he never tried to hide anything. He just, I think everybody was too scared to ask him about it. Like it was just, you know.
Most likely because not only because of, you know, the act surrounding the rumor, but also the fact that he was an officer, not an enlisted man. Right. So none of the enlisted men would ever have the gall to ask him something like that.
Right.
When I watched that show for the first time, having never read the book or known anything else about it, and I saw that episode, my immediate gut feel was that actually did happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, years later, because you need to understand, I had been in the Australian Army for 4 years, but I had never been anywhere. I hadn't done operational tours or anything. Nothing was going on in the 90s. I watched Band of Brothers just as I was looking to re-enlist. And so years later, with the experience I then had in the British Army in the Worldwide War on Terror, and I look back at Band of Brothers going, he absolutely executed those guys, and he probably did give them cigarettes as well to make himself feel a little bit more comfortable with it.
Right.
But yeah, 100%. You're not going to deal with that stuff on like having to look after POWs. It's one of the most impactful lines in all of the interviews for me is when they're interviewing Bill Garnier, and specifically about D-Day. And he talks about, you know, I just learned that my brother had been killed in Monte Cassino.
Monte Cassino, yeah.
He just learned that, and he said, I did a lot of killing D-Day.
Right.
The way he says that just hits me in the gut because like he's quite matter of fact, but man, he did a lot of killing D-Day. He killed a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's obviously made peace with that. And
right. Well, there's that whole point of conflict between him and Winters because he jumps the gun on the order to ambush the wagon with the Germans and the artillery in it, or the ordnance in it and stuff, the German troop convoy. And, he's like, you're going to wait for my order next time. And he's just like, yes, sir. Because he's just still fuming. I mean, that becomes a run-on thing, because the guy Hall, who doesn't know any of them, he's like, what's up with him? And he's like, Malarkey says, well, his name's Garnier, get it? And he's like, he's like, okay, so he's got a shitty name, but why is he acting like that? And then Garnier keeps preventing people from telling this new kid, even though he's not a replacement, he's just from a different company. He's like, you don't, shut your yap, Malarkey, don't tell him anything, that kind of thing. Really fascinating. Sonny Frisch, thank you for the super chat. He says, Michael, have you seen The Bridge from 1959 by Bernard Wicki, released in the US on DVD and Blu-ray? Oh, I will check it out, sir. Thank you for letting me know. And if you're not a sir, apologize if you're not a sir. Sorry about that. Thank you for the recommendation. So, all right. Let's see. All right. So we're caught up on super chats. I know we're about to hit the 2-hour mark, and I think it's a good place to cap off at 2 hours. So I don't want to run too long over that, but we're in Carentan now. There's this amazing production recreating the taking of Carentan, where they're stuck in the ditches on the side of the road, and he's trying to get people to get up and keep moving. And Winter stands up in the middle of the road, and the bullets are just flying all around him. And he's doing the thing that a great leader does, where he's just like, move, move, move. And they get into the town. There are so many moments in that battle that resonate with me, visuals, scenes, lines, things like that. Which ones, when I say Band of Brothers, Carentan, what do you immediately recall?
I recall the first image that pops into my head is Bull Randleman picking up, is it Tipper? Who basically has just been blown apart by an artillery shell. Right. He walks out of this general store. His legs are shredded. He's blind. And Bull Randleman just picks him up in a fireman's carry. Right. But you're right. There are so many things going on in that episode. Yeah. First Sergeant Lipton has, I can't remember who it is that comes over to him after he gets hit by an anti-aircraft weapon. Right. He's wounded, and the guy, he doesn't even need to say anything. He just looks down at his pelvic region, and the guy knows shit. He's worried if he's had his balls blown off. Right. And he unbuttons his fly and has a look and went, "You're all good. It's still there." Right. Everything's right where it's supposed to be. Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I was talking about earlier, where how this particular episode is really, it's the best and the worst of the whole series for me, because those scenes in Carentan are just absolutely terrific. I mean, you were sitting there now with a picture of Lutz. I remember when he's one of the first guys to reach Carentan when the Germans open fire and they get pinned down. Right. And the guy next to him says, where the hell did everybody go? And he's like, I have no idea. Right. And the way he delivers that line, it's an amazing piece of acting. Amazing. Yeah. There's a moment in it. All the ones you've listed are on my checklist, and there's that one where they try to. It's Leapgot and another guy, and
three other guys, and they're trying to follow what they think are they're either just coming out of an apartment or a house, or they're about to go right back into it. I can't remember exactly how it all stages up, but they're all now back outside, and the one guy's still in there, and this explosion happens within the house, and then he just comes walking out, like his eye is, bulging out of his head, and he's all just messed up, and and the two other guys standing there are horrified. Like they don't know what to do. They're just like, and Leapgot just has this, he just knows what to do. He's like, yeah, this is horrible, but this man's a human being, and he's our brother, and he's our friend. And he like takes him in this cradle hold, because the guy's just totally torn up, and he's just like, it's going to be okay. And he pats his head and literally holds him close. And he's like, come on, guys. He's like, come on, help me out. And they kind of snap out of it. And they're like, oh yeah, this is our friend. We've got to, we can't be standing here looking like, shocked kids.
Scaring the crap out of the guy. I'm actually kind of misremembering it when I talked about Bull Randleman, Diamonds carrying. I'm thinking it was that guy. It's not.
Oh,
that was
okay.
A different person.
Right.
Bull Randleman picks up a guy who actually loses his lower leg. But yeah, I'm blending those kind of two memories. Yeah, you're right. When that guy comes out, it's Joe Liebgott who's there. And he just instantly goes into this very calm, reassuring mode. Go, hey, Matt, sit down. We're going to get you sorted out. Hey, guys, come on.
Right.
I've seen people behave like that in real life, it's Jesse Guardo says Karen Tan for the best episode. It would be for me if it wasn't for the Blythe parts of the episode.
Right.
The best episode for me is episode. Just checking my Blu-ray here. I can't remember if it's part 6 or part 7, Bastogne or the Breaking Point. I think Bastogne is my favorite episode, the best episode.
Yeah,
the episode where Joe Toy and Bill Garnier both lose their legs, but that's going to be discussed in the Retro Blasting Analog Toys Band of Brothers Part 2 show.
Yes, yes.
Which I'm really looking forward to now. This is the most fun that I've had on a live stream in a long, long time.
Oh, mine too. Barring, I don't want to take anything away from the interviews I've done with some great YouTubers, but that's, putting the story on them. We get to talk about a story that's apart from both of us in many ways. Obviously, you are a military man, but this is World War II, which was before both our times. But yeah, this is the most fun I've had on a live stream in forever.
But having said that, like World War II before both our times, okay, dialing it all the way back to the first episode, Camp Toccoa, Georgia, they're running up and down Currahee, they're doing pack marches at night.
Right.
That, for me, is the best depiction of infantry training that I've ever seen. And it might surprise you to hear that it hasn't changed much in the last 70 years. When I'm watching those guys running up and down Currahee in their PT gear, they're doing pack marches with their belt kit and their weapons. They're living in very basic accommodation, spaghetti noodles and ketchup. It's just noodles and ketchup. It's, as an Italian, you can't call this spaghetti. It's noodles and ketchup. That's the type of food we still get fed. I watched that and go, that is, and the way that the training becomes more sophisticated as it goes along. That's how it happens.
Right.
You do basic training, then you start to do specialist training. That's not in the Special Forces, that's just General Army.
Right.
And the way that whole thing evolves from the training they do in Camp Toccoa, Georgia, to then the maneuvers that they're doing in Pottery, England. And I mean, we were talking earlier about Sobel, getting hoodwinked by the impressions. But then there's the whole thing where he goes up to Winters in that first episode where they're all in the trenches in the forest,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, you know, because he can't read a map to save his life. He thinks he's in the wrong position. He's like, we need to move, and he's like, sir, we're in a textbook position for ambush.
Right.
And he's like, no, we got to move. And Winter's okay. He's the commanding officer. I've got to follow his lead. And they get up, and he walks out with his big dumb bomber jacket, and everyone else stands up, and boom, they're dead.
Right.
And then again, all these little moments, he turns around because the umpire says, right, you know, leave 3 men dead here and report back to back, whatever it is. The way he turns around with a pistol and goes, you.
Yes.
Man, never mind the fact that he's a captain.
Right.
When I was in the military, if a captain did that and pointed a weapon, loaded or unloaded, at his guys like that, the senior sergeant would have knocked his block off.
Sure.
That is so disrespectful.
Yeah.
Behave that way. So
yeah.
I don't know how historically accurate that is, but again, it's another little moment that at the time I was like, you prick.
Yeah. And again, that could just be Hollywood doing its thing, and maybe Sobel, who was a trained soldier, never would have done that. It's hard to say. That they take license. I would be interested to find out if that is actually the way he gestured. I'm sure in Winter's memoirs, and even some of the other guys who've written memoirs, there might be a kernel in there, that not a Kernel, not a kernel. That says, that says a morsel, that says something like that. Thank you so much, Greg. He says these streams are going to be as long as the actual Band of Brothers series. It's great hearing your thoughts and experiences mix in. Well, you're welcome. We love this show. We love this show. I mean,
I don't envision this as being as long as the series is roughly 10 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we've covered, for want of a better word, the first act of the series.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I've envisioned, if you are willing to accommodate me,
I am, sir.
Two more parts where you know the middle act is all about the Battle of the Bulge.
Yep.
And then it is, you know, the final solution, Austria, Eagle's Nest.
Yep.
Is the final part. So I'm when we're doing it, I'm excited.
Well, we can do it. We can do it in 2 weeks or less if you want. That's not a problem, sir. We can do that.
Awesome.
Look, these are the kinds of when I know that we've got a topic that we can dig into. It's not so you know how this feels, where people say, let's do a live stream, and then you go, right, about what? And then everyone's kind of like, I don't know, maybe we can talk about, like, I don't know. And you just go, oh, this is going to be a long hour and a half. But when it's something that you like, you know, when it's something that you're really interested in, the time just flies. Like I'm looking up here and I'm like, oh my God, we're already at 2 hours. I didn't realize that. I wanted to mention one thing about the Carentan episode, even though it's not quite the end of the episode. It's something that, because the end of the episode, of course, is Blythe finally kind of finding his courage, I guess, a little bit, thanks to Winters in that moment, and then he's leading a squad in to try and clear a house, and he gets shot. There are 2 moments I want to bring up. One is the recurring theme in that episode, or story point, I guess, not a theme. It's a story point of the guys going to get their laundry from because they keep talking about going back to England. She's an English woman. So I guess, so they're going back to England for rest and R&R or something. And she's got all these unpaid bundles of laundry from people that Malarkey realizes aren't coming back, you know, and he starts trying to pay her for the bundles of clothes because he doesn't want to tell her that these guys
are dead. Yeah, he doesn't want to say that.
The other part, which is a little less maudlin, because I think that whole setup is very, very nicely done, even though they try and sell you on the idea that Blythe is also one of these casualties, which is like, whoops.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really well done, I don't know why this moment stands out to me so much, but it does. probably because I found out it was true. Winters has set up like a CP or whatever at Carentan. And this guy just comes riding up on this white stallion. And he's telling him about giving him like this update. And he rides off. Winters and him have an exchange, and he rides off. And that's when suddenly a ricochet comes out of nowhere and hits Winters in the calf or the shin or whatever it is. Yeah. And he's just like, or the foot. I guess it's the foot. I couldn't believe that there actually was this guy on a white horse. I think his name is in the book, but he's this guy found Gandalf. I know, right? The Lone Ranger. This guy just shows up. He found this horse and he just started riding it around. He found it in a farm, and then that whole idea that you think the town is clear. You've got jeeps going through. You've got guys setting up tanks, and you've got people, setting up triage units, and you got people handing out rations and ammo, and the town is yours. And then all of a sudden, German sniper bullet just comes flying in from out of nowhere. And I guess that's my final question for this episode for you, Tony, is any taken location, you've cleared all the houses, you've done all the stuff, is it ever truly secure? No.
And in my own experiences, is very different to World War II.
Sure.
Is that you can clear a compound of enemy combatants. Mm-hmm. You have no idea where there are IEDs laid. That's what we face in the modern culture.
Uh-huh.
You can clear an entire compound in Helmand province of all the Taliban. Mm-hmm. Think you're safe, you're behind walls, you've got protection from fast air, and then a guy sits down and detonates an IED and has himself blown to pieces.
God.
The same thing in World War II. You can think you've cleared the whole thing, but there's still that one German up in the top of a tower with his Mauser, and, he wants to give you a bad day.
Right.
I think the way I'll like to end this episode, I talked earlier about Harry Welsh, at the dinner party going, I bazookaed a German tank. The only person who tops that is the guy opposite him at the dinner table who goes, yeah, and I rode into Carentan on a white stallion.
Right? I mean, you can't, once you see that image, you can't forget that image. It's like, because it's one of those things that Big Red 1 again does so well, which is these random moments where you go, boy, this would be surreal if it wasn't war. And it's kind of surreal even when it is a war, but you just get used to it. It's just like, yep, somebody found a horse somewhere and no one's telling them not to ride it. And I guess, okay, cool. So Smuggler's Canyon, I just want to highlight this comment. He says, you guys are discussing the show with such dignity, respect, and compassion. Wonderful stream, guys. And Tony, thank you for sharing more of your personal experiences.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. Well, with that, I guess we can wrap up this first of 3 episodes, live discussions about Band of Brothers. But we shall return. The Band of Brothers live discussion shall return in a few weeks' time. We'll notify everybody when we're ready to go.
Whenever you want. We can do next Friday if you want. I'm
awesome. I'm actually fine with that. 2022 has always, for me, guys, all of you listening out there who may not be on my Patreon or Tony's Patreon, 2022 has always been about I want to do what I want in 2022. I'm not going to be beholden to any modern toy releases or reviewing this. I am going to make the videos I want to make in 2022 and the streams that I want to make and talk about the things I want to talk about. And so, Tony, thank you for bringing up this topic and suggesting it, because this is something I didn't like. I always want to talk about Band of Brothers, but now, I'm so excited to keep talking about this with you. So thank you,
dude. Let's tell the audience right now. Next Friday, same time, same channel, part 2.
And I'll pull more clips, and you and I can You and I can confer. We'll get more clips going. We'll get it all. We'll get it all dolled up. All right, everyone. Awesome. Tony, where can everybody find you if they don't already know who you are?
You can find me on YouTube. Just search Analog Toys. There's a lot of extra content on my Patreon, so you can look up Analog Toys on Patreon. And there will be a video coming out, I say later today, that's my time. Probably be tomorrow for most of you. It'll be dropping on Patreon. I'm talking about the book of Bubba Fat. I've already laid down the audio timeline. I'm just pulling a whole heap of clips. In a strange way, it's kind of like one of your thought pieces where it's one of the first videos I'm doing where I don't appear on camera.
Yeah.
But I am 3 episodes in, and I hate that show so much.
I can't wait to watch your video.
I want to rejoice in how much I hate it. And I've also deleted my Disney Plus subscription, and I'm not watching the rest because it's utter dog poo.
This is by far, and I don't mean this as a disservice to any of your content, because I know when people say that, it makes it sound like other content's being discounted. I don't mean that at all. I love all the Analog Toys content. But as far as like sheer gripping the edge of the table anticipation for a video, this is one like when you did Evel Knievel jumping Snake Mountain. Like I was so ready to see that. When what you just described to me, I cannot wait to watch that video. I will be there ready to go. So yeah,
I'm sure you're going to enjoy it.
Awesome. I can't wait. Well, everybody, thanks for sticking with us, and have a great rest of your Friday night or Saturday in the case of Tony and others in Australia. And we'll see you next Friday for the next Band of Brothers discussion. And hopefully, if I'm lucky, there will be a major feature video drop in between, if I'm lucky, that will also feature
and
Tony
I'm in
Robert.
That too.
and Matt Movie 611 is in that one.
Yes,
so
Matthew
you will see that too. All right, everyone. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.